Everyone, good evening. I'm really happy to see so many people here today, despite the short notice. I'm really happy to also to introduce Richard Stallman, who's here to give a talk to us. Many of you may have been present 2 years ago. Richard was here as well. How many of you were there at that time? Oh, okay, not so many. Okay, good. So,
well, that's good. That means I'm reaching a different group of people.
Yeah, great.
People who I didn't already speak to.
Yeah, super. In this case, Richard, I would say that we carry on with the way we planned it before. With the video, yeah. And so we'd like to start this talk with a short 14-minute video. This is recorded from the TED Talk that Richard gave in Geneva, which outlines the basic principles behind free software.
Hey, you were supposed to let me do this.
Is that so? Oh, sorry about that.
Well,
go ahead.
I want to tell you why I start with this 14-minute video. It's because I practiced over and over giving that particular short talk, and it's the briefest and most efficient introduction to the basic ideas of free software.
Good. Thank you, Richard. So
I could say all those things right now, but I wouldn't make it quite as good or quite as efficiently short.
Sure.
And I might leave something out.
Good. In this case, we'll be starting with this 40-minute introduction. By the way, an introduction to Richard Stallman. Who needs an introduction for Richard Stallman? Yeah, okay. Oh, one person, yes, okay. So this is Richard Stallman, actually Dr. Richard Stallman. Have I missed one, Richard?
I didn't count them.
Yeah.
I'm too sleepy to keep count.
Yeah. But he said we could be informal and just call him Dr. Stallman for today. So Richard Stallman, he started the GNU project and the Free Software Foundation in 1985. So he's been campaigning for our rights to use software and to avoid other types of injustices for more than 40 years now. So it is a great honor. Thanks, Richard, for coming here to the OST and talking to us about this very important topic. So we'll now start with this video, which outlines the basic principles of free software.
The others. So nowadays, computing is so important in society that the freedoms of free software are among the human rights that society must establish and protect. Thus, how to help? Well, you can write free software. You can organize groups to campaign and persuade schools and governments to move to free software. You can help other people when they have trouble using free software or help them install it. You can say free software and spread the philosophical ideas. Moving to free software is the first step in the liberation of cyberspace. But of course, we also use the internet. We need other freedoms there, like network neutrality and putting an end to surveillance of people in general.
So, where do we go from there? I couldn't cover all the important ideas of the free software movement in 14 minutes. So, there's more for me to tell you. First, there is copyleft. In French, le gauche d'auteur. The point is, any free license, by definition, permits making modified versions and redistributing them. But will those modified versions be free or not? Well, that is a further distinction. There are certain free licenses that require modified versions to be free as well. And there are other free licenses that don't require this. They do permit this, but they also permit people who don't feel a moral value for freedom to make modified versions and make them proprietary. And when they do that, that causes somewhat of a problem for the community. Back in 1985, when I first had a piece of GNU software to release, I had to come up with a license for it. And I realized from what I had seen around me that if I released my software under a simple free license that simply gave permissions to do things, people would make modified versions and they would make them proprietary. Some would make them proprietary, others would make their modifications free. But for the ones who made it proprietary, I would be in an unequal competition with them, because every new feature I implemented, they would be able to put into their version. But when they made changes in their and put them in their proprietary version, they would be off limits to me. I couldn't put their changes into my version. So it would be an unfair competition. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to be forever competing to catch up with people who had the advantage of using all of my work. I wanted to make this competition fair. So I came up with the idea of copyleft. The idea of copyleft is that the license says, yes, you're free to make a modified version and distribute copies of that, but there's a condition, a requirement. You must release your version under the same license as my version. So your version will have to be free. It will be required to be free. And just as you will be able to put my future changes into your version, I'll be able to put your changes into my version. So instead of an unfair competition, we will be cooperating to the extent we want to. So I have seen that copyleft is extremely important because there are companies, sometimes very large companies, that want to include free programs in their non-free systems. They would like to take the free software and make non-free modified versions and distribute them to hundreds or millions of people, but without freedom. And if we let them use our work and strip off the freedom, then the users won't have freedom. So the goal of giving freedom to the world will have been thwarted because we didn't take precautions against that danger. So a copyleft license takes precautions. The GNU General Public License is the copyleft license that I designed back in the 80s. And it spells out in legal language the rule that the modified versions, anybody's modified versions, they're permitted, but they have to be free and copylefted in the same way. Now, today's computing tends to subjugate all users at every level, and system engineers are constantly pushing people into wearing even more chains to tie them up and tie them down. If you look at non-free software, you'll find non-free software that you are using you'll find it restricts you in innumerable ways. But they also try to wipe out the idea of freedom as a goal, the idea of the free software movement. Often we write some free software because it's fun, it's challenging, because we hope that people will use our software and admire us. There's nothing wrong with those motivations. But there's one special motivation that keeps most of us working on this, and that is the desire to win freedom for the world. And we need to remind people of that. We need to show people that idea, because most people, until they encounter the free software movement, they never come across an idea like that. In everything they hear about software from others, it's always a matter of convenience and what you can do with it and what money you might make. Right and wrong simply aren't mentioned. But that's what free software is all about. And because of that, it's crucial not to go beyond just developing software and talking about how convenient it is, so how about using it? We have to talk about the fact that this software respects your freedom and show you what freedom means, so that you'll start to care about it and you'll see a reason to reject a program because it's non-free. So I don't use any non-free software. I just won't accept it. If someone says, look at this non-free program, isn't it convenient? I respond, yeah, it would take away my freedom. Get rid of it. And I don't care what convenience they're offering me in exchange for my freedom. It's too high a price. So I'd like to talk about the idea of divide and rule, or divide and subjugate. If you look at the way a non-free program is distributed, it tends to keep people divided, to divide users from each other by prohibiting them from cooperating. Even if it occurs to them to cooperate, they're blocked and forbidden. They're blocked because they don't have the source code. So it's not easy to understand what it is that program's doing and make any changes in it. If you'd have to patch the binary, and first you'd have to reverse engineer it to figure out what it's doing, that makes it so hard that most people would just give up. But if you do that work, then you're forbidden to share the results of the knowledge you have achieved that way with anyone else. So divided and subjugated. Whereas free software encourages people to help each other, so it builds social cooperation, which is, after all, what society is about. The more social cohesion a society has, the more people are inclined to help each other, the better it does. But the society of users of non-free software is forbidden to have social cohesion. And the developers of non-free software typically, they distribute their software and they design their software so as to have more power over the users, tie them down even more, and divide them even more, and get more power and control. So let me give you a description of some of the nasty things that companies actually do. First of all, there's a lot of surveillance. Nowadays, you can be almost certain that a system with non-free software is doing surveillance on the users, collecting lots of data on them, and sometimes indirectly data about other people. Whatever data they can find a way to get, they get. Mostly governments are on the side of business nowadays. Most governments won't try to protect the rights of mere people. And so they permit companies to just put a license terms and conditions of use, which are the things you have to give up in order to use the program. And in it, they'll put whatever they demand. And people have become so discouraged about this that they don't even read them. They just say yes. And later on, they find out that they agreed to be mistreated in various ways. Because I have used non-free software so little since around 1990 or so, I have almost never faced the question of whether I want to use a non-free program. So I never needed to look at the license. I hardly ever use a website that makes any demands on me, on a user. You know, if it publishes some articles, well, I don't mind that. And there's generally no way to make me agree to anything in order to see an article if it will let me fetch the article. Okay, so I fetch the article and I read it, and maybe I post a link to it. But other kinds of websites typically demand that the user agree to terms and conditions which can be oppressive and unjust. So I would never think of clicking I agree without studying that license. And since this situation for me arises rarely, I can afford to read those few licenses I encounter. And occasionally I decide that one is innocent, and I agree. But if I find it's not innocent, then I don't agree. I'd rather not use the site because I've come to value my freedom enough that I won't throw it away. And you can do that too. The reason that they are so ready to subjugate users and make them agree to give up their rights is that they know most people will just do it with a sigh of despair. But you don't have to despair once you start to resist. So, one of the things that they typically do is surveil you, and then to stop you from helping other people get around the surveillance, they make you promise not to do that. And because the software is non-free, it's not easy to make a modified version which doesn't surveil people. But people will be amazed by how much surveillance there is now in the software that websites send to users' browsers. They have a method of identifying the user, even and recognizing when the same user returns, even without explicitly asking. It's called browser profiling. The web server sends benchmark programs to the browser. It does something over and over again and measures how long that takes. So that it may do many different benchmarks, and for each one it measures how much runtime that takes. And it sends those results back to the server. Well, every computer, it turns out, is a little bit different from every other computer. So even if they're, say, if two computers are the same model, their benchmarks will be slightly different in a predictable way. So the server can tell when it sees the same web browser and computer again. And so sites work together on this. So suppose there are 100 sites that are cooperating. They all send the same benchmark programs. And so if a user has gone to this site and later goes to that site, they know it was the same person. If there are 100 sites, they all know if they ever see that person, they know it's the same one. And if one of those sites happens to know that person's name, they all know the person's name. They tell each other. And then every time you connect to any of those sites, it knows who you are. And it can collect lots of data, which might then be available to a dictatorship to find out that you're a dissident and put you in prison. Or maybe they will just cause you to have to pay more for insurance. There are all sorts of things they might do. Now, with free software, we can stop these things from happening. But another kind of mistreatment is by uploading the user's data. So it's a web server might not just save the data you actually send, it may send programs to upload data that you have so that you get more, so that it gets more data about you. And especially apps can do this. Apps generally have more power to mistreat users than websites. There are limits on what code websites can execute in a browser, but there are essentially no limits to what an app can do. Then there is the practice of trying to stop users from sharing by encrypting the data that they send. And then to make any sense of that data requires a special secret proprietary program. This is known as DRM, Digital Restrictions Management. And we first saw this when things like DVDs began to have encrypted videos, and only a proprietary program could decrypt the video. And the proprietary program was used to limit what people could do with the decrypted movie, so that you couldn't give a copy to anyone else. Well, people began reverse engineering the secret code in order to be able to write free software to decrypt these copies and make use of them freely. And there's been an arms race ever since then. That was the early 90s, I believe, when that started to happen. Nowadays, Google uses DRM for things it transmits over the web. There are non-free programs that the usual browsers can dynamically load, and those are the decryption program, which would allow a user to view whatever is being sent. But it's non-free software, so you've got to expect it to mistreat you, and it does, because it's designed to make it impossible for you to save a copy of the result of the decryption. It can only be sent straight to the screen. There are also backdoors that can be used to sabotage people's computers. And for almost anything else, Backdoors vary because each backdoor is designed to let somebody send a command to do this or that or that. And so what things do they want the power to do to you? They build those into the software, and when they send the signal, that non-free program will do some nasty thing to you. But the most general of them is a universal backdoor that allows the company to send new software, to replace the software with whatever, anything. And now that company can do any nasty thing to you because they're not limited by the code that's already installed. They replace it with new code, which has some new ability to mistreat you. Backdoors can be used to delete files on your machine. The Amazon swindle has a backdoor, and it can be used to remotely delete books. And various books have been remotely deleted. Now, Amazon says, you didn't notice, but you signed a contract saying that in certain conditions we could do this. As I see it, basically pressuring everyone to sign that contract does not make that contract morally legitimate. It should be illegal. And if it isn't illegal, we should reject those devices anyway. I do. I'd rather not have an e-reader than have an e-reader that ran non-free software that was designed to mistreat me. They also have DRM, Digital Restrictions Management. So this is what happens, how Amazon sets up the possibility of deleting a book that's in your device and then arguing that it's legitimate. But what it depends on is a basic premise, which is that if Amazon led you to close your eyes and say, I agree, and in the thing you're agreeing to, it says Amazon can delete books on your machine, that this means it is legitimate for Amazon to delete books on your machine. Well, I say it's never legitimate. It's Orwellian. That nobody should ever be allowed to delete books on your machine under any circumstances whatsoever. And that they shouldn't be allowed to distribute code that gives them the power to delete books on your machine and then stop you from changing that code so they can't. You see, non-free software is always crucial when companies distribute code that lets them mistreat you, because if it were free software, if users could study these programs and fix their intentional flaws and install the corrected version, the users would do that, and the companies would be defeated. Another thing that these backdoors can do is install new versions of the software. This is a kind of universal backdoor. Windows has, for many versions now, had a universal backdoor that allows any change to be made by Microsoft forcibly. Microsoft can force install a different version of Windows. If you have a Windows computer, Microsoft has this power, and they do it. They just decide we want to replace the version of Windows in that machine with this new one. Maybe it has new useful features. Maybe it has new unjust malfeatures. But either way, they can force it. So if the new version gives additional power over the user, I call it a downgrade. They'd call it an upgrade. And the latest malicious upgrade is that you can't start using a Windows computer except by identifying yourself to Microsoft. So you can't use the machine anonymously at all. It's sort of the ultimate in subjugation. Now, non-free software is bad for security. But what is security? What does it really mean? When proprietary software companies talk about security, what they mean is the company's control over your computer. If anything could pry the computer loose from the company's control, they call that a security flaw or failure. And they say that they need to be able to fix that. I have a different definition of security. It's your computer. It should be under your control. And a security failure is anything that lets someone else take that control away from you. Therefore, for instance, that version of Windows that won't run unless you give your personal data to Microsoft, that is a security flaw. So Windows is designed to be insecure. It would only be considered secure from a perverse perspective that defines security as Microsoft still has control over this machine. Once you start looking at the media when they talk about security issues, you'll see that they're always talking about the wrong idea of security. Not your security, it's Microsoft's security, Apple's security, Google's security. Never yours. It's only with free software that you can have security in using that program. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to do. Making a program or system secure is hard work. But at least it helps to be aiming for the right definition of security instead of the wrong definition of security like those companies. Another nasty thing done by non-free software is addictiveness. We know that many digital systems are designed to be addictive to users. And typically this applies most to accessing servers and there are things that the server can do to make this so-called service addictive. But parts of the job are done by the client program. If the client program is free software, you can defeat some of the addictive practices and thus reduce how addictive the service turns out to be. So addictiveness is also part of it. For instance, part of what makes something addictive is that it interrupts you fairly often and demands your attention. If your client program is free, you could set it up, you could design it, you could modify it so that it doesn't always interrupt you when it's supposed to. You could tell it sometimes, save up these warnings and reminders and interruptions. Save them up for later. I'll tell you when I'm interested in seeing them. And then you could also say, here's some rules to ignore these alerts. So the ones you don't really care about, you would never have to see. This is what it's like to be able to modify a program to work the way you want. You could reduce the addictiveness of that client program. Another problem we have is dark patterns. For instance, the classic example of a dark pattern is to make it difficult to unsubscribe. And this concerns the server. It's a server typically that you subscribe to. The point is that it ought to be as easy to unsubscribe as it is to subscribe, but there's no law requiring that. So they try to make it extremely easy to subscribe. But then when you say you want to unsubscribe, they ask you over and over again, are you really sure? Could it be possible that you want to unsubscribe from our wonderful service? Think the fifth time about it, and then think the sixth time about it, and then the seventh time. And after 10 questions, you might just give up in frustration and not unsubscribe. But if you get all the way through, eventually it will end your subscription. Now, although these ultimately come from the server, they're coming through a client program. And if that program is free, you could make it ignore some of those, do you really mean it, and just send yes, without bothering you. So these dark patterns wouldn't be quite as dark if you had a free client program designed to help people unsubscribe. Another thing they do is censorship. The client program can check for certain things it doesn't want you to say and not transmit them. They do this. Then there's even a practice where you are made to sign a contract saying you won't do certain outside activities. There's a thing called Movie Pass, which does this. You sign up to be able to watch some movies, but there are other conditions put on you that are not even about watching the movie. It's just other things you have to promise you won't do. They can force obsolescence by using non-free software. They can make sure that you can't adapt the newer versions of the system of the device to the device you own. You'll have to buy another device in order to run the new version of the system. And this is responsible for a large amount of unnecessary e-waste, programmed obsolescence, literally programmed by software, new versions of the software for the device that have new features, but they won't work on your old device. You have to buy a new one. There is a practice called tethering, where you can't use the device unless it's in communication, at least some of the time, with the manufacturer's server. Now, sometimes they just insist that it has to connect to the internet once a month and tell the manufacturer's server, I'm still here, I'm still in so-and-so's house, and still sending you information about so-and-so. But they can go even further than that. For many so-called smart devices, the only way the so-called owner of the device can send a command to the device is through the manufacturer's server. So the device and the owner are in the same apartment. But if the owner wants to send a command to the device, person can't just send it directly. It has to go over the internet to the manufacturer's server, which will send it back to the device. The result is that the manufacturer's server snoops on everything that the owner does with the device. The word owner in this case has been weakened to the point it means almost nothing. I read about a sex toy designed to receive commands over the internet. Perhaps maybe person A is sending the commands to the device that's in use by person B. Well, I could imagine that might be enjoyable, but it's unjust, because all the commands pass through the manufacturer's server. I suppose A and B both have to have accounts on that server, which means the server knows who is sending the commands and who they're being sent to. And surveillance was not an afterthought. The device was designed specifically for this surveillance. We know that because the device includes a thermometer, and the temperature readings are not shown to the users. The users are not interested, but they're sent to the manufacturer, because with those values, the manufacturer can tell whether the device is in contact with a human body. I suspect it can also tell how the device is in contact with a human body. This is a lot of information about those people, which the manufacturer might find useful for some sort of purposes it would rather not admit. The right way to handle this is to have some sort of encrypted communication using free software between A and B, and then B's computer can send to the device the commands received from A, as long as B continues to enable input from A, which you can easily do, of course, by changing the list of keys with which other people are allowed to send commands to your toy. When I found out about these, they made me laugh because it's so obviously abusive. But most people have been told that these are smart devices. They're great for convenience. How can you possibly criticize something like this, which is made so normal? But it's advertising that makes it seem normal. It's advertising together with amplifying the reactions of people who don't know that these things contain non-free software, and non-free software is usually malware. And if you look for what nasty thing they could possibly do, very likely they did it. There's also remote shutoff. The manufacturer might decide to make your device, this product, whatever it is, stop running. For instance, this is a problem that farmers have because tractors by various manufacturers, in particular John Deere, a famously nasty manufacturer of tractors, it makes as many detractors as it makes tractors. Do you know what a detractor is? Do you know what a tractor is? It's used in a farm. And the owner, after discovering how much the software in that tractor mistreats him, then becomes a detractor. Anyway, they can remotely switch off the tractor. They can lock it so it won't run. And this was confirmed by the fact that Russians invading Ukraine captured some tractors and stole them and took them back to Russia, where they put them to work on farms, and then the manufacturer remotely shut them off so that they wouldn't run at all. And people applauded this. They don't realize that this is just an example of the kind of unjust power that the tractor manufacturer applies to all the farmers in any country. It just happened that in this case, it fell into a war situation where this action that normally is vicious and shouldn't be allowed happened to be perhaps legitimate. And that's the nature of war. People are put in a situation of combat where they have to do things to each other which normally would be horrible, but it's necessary. And at least most of us think that in those special circumstances, it's justifiable. I'm not a pacifist, by the way. But the thing is, it's not just in a war that they can do this to people. They can threaten to do this to any of their customers. And what this shows is, in effect, they're at war with their customers. There are onerous subscription requirements, sometimes imposed post hoc, which means basically you subscribe and you see the conditions, and then one day they tell you, by the way, there are new conditions. Now there's this rule you have to follow, and if you won't do that, we'll just shut it off. They can impose any demand they want if they can shut off the device. These smart products often stop you from installing any other operating system. You should be free to install some other operating system, but those companies won't let you. So they have special keys that you need to know to install an operating system, and they don't tell the purchasers those keys. So you're stuck with the malicious system that they give you. And this is one more malicious functionality on top of the others. There is intentional incompatibility where they put in a system that won't interoperate with that because they don't want it to. And because they control the software in the product, they can block it from interoperating with that other thing, and there's nothing you can do about it. There is insecurity that users can't fix. The product may have software in it that is insecure in the free software sense, where it can do things that deny the owner control. And even if it's an accident, I'm not saying that all insecurity is intentionally imposed by the manufacturer or software developer. Sometimes it's an accident. But if that company is not interested in fixing the problem, then the user can't fix it. The users can't get together with their users group and hire somebody to fix it, which with free software you can do. People do this. And then when the product allows installation of applications, they can control which applications, the manufacturer can control which applications you're permitted to install. Google is threatening to do that now with Android. using the power it has, unjust power, over Android, it's threatening to grab additional unjust power over the users of Android. There is manipulation of users. For instance, there is manipulative pricing. That's a kind that you've heard of. You know that Uber adjusts the prices so as to make people pay the most possible, and will change the prices, will offer different prices to different people. And it turns out that some airlines are doing the same thing. The price of a certain ticket, when it's offered to you, will be different from when it's offered to him, and she might get a different offer. And they don't tell you that some people are getting a different offer. And they do this through software. And because of this, you have no idea what practices they're following. So there are more which I haven't thought of or come across and thought of putting into this list. But the crucial point is that developers of non-free software are very clever at searching for ways to mistreat you by means of the power they have because you're running their non-free software. I would not allow any product that's in my house to be able to talk to anything else on the internet, because I don't want it to talk with the manufacturer's server. If it can phone home to the manufacturer, it will be given from time to time commands to do something nasty to me. And the only way to make sure this doesn't happen when it has non-free software in it is prevent any communication. There's no way I could tell what the communication means. It'll be in some code that they made up. So there's no way I could check for a malicious command and block that. To be safe, I must block all communication. For instance, I have a printer at home. It's made by a company that is known to put malicious software in the printers. But it can't get a command to do something nasty to me because it can't talk to anyone. It can only communicate with one other computer, which is my laptop when I'm home. They have a special Ethernet which has only 2 machines on it, no hub, and no gateway to anything else. It's the only safe way to prevent that machine from trying to do malicious things. So, non-free software tends to be software for suckers. The temptation is so great that developers whose consciences don't think about this issue, they're constantly looking for clever new ways to mistreat their own customers. And some of the products I just mentioned do other kinds of malicious functionalities. For instance, I brought up tractors to explain the nastiness of remote shutoff. But they do surveillance also. I heard from a farmer and a right-to-repair activist that farmers are afraid that John Deere tractors are observing how well each part of the farm is doing and sending those statistics to John Deere, which will then sell the farmer conclusions derived from that data but the farmers can't get the data itself. So they're losing autonomy. They're being forced into another kind of dependency on John Deere. Now, I mentioned John Deere because I know that it's doing these things, but that's not to say that other manufacturers of tractors are better. I just don't know. I would guess that they're similar, but it would require investigation to find that out. So, can you trust your computing? Under what circumstances can you trust your computing? Well, first of all, if you do it by running free software on a computer you control, then in principle you can trust your computing. At least you're not being kept helpless. It may be a lot of work to study the software and see if there's a bug, but at least you can try. And you could join with other people, hire programmers, to try to study that code, looking for whatever does things you wouldn't like. But you can't trust your computing if you're running non-free software, because you can't hold the program or its developer accountable. You can't even really tell what it's doing if you can't read the source code. And if you can't install other debugging software on that product, you can't even tell what it's actually doing. So if you use non-free software, then you can't trust your computing. But also, if you do your computing on someone else's server, well, then you can never trust it, because you can never verify what program is actually running on someone else's server. The server operator might say, we installed this free operating system, but doesn't have to tell you that they modified one of the programs to do something additional that you might not like copy your data and save it or send it to someone else. Because you can't control what someone else does for you using per own server. And you also can't trust your computing if you run a program sent to you to be executed right away. For instance, if you connect to a website and it has a JavaScript program which gets sent to your browser and it executes right away, well, even if it's free software, you don't have a chance to decide which version of that program you're going to run. So this is something that needs to be changed in the way the web operates. The idea of you don't ever even have to install this program. It'll just run when you're talking to a certain website. Well, there's a fundamental flaw in that approach, a security flaw. In order to have control over your computing, you need to be able to decide which version you're going to install. And then be sure your computer will run the version you chose, such that nobody else can decide to change it and impose that decision on you. So, what are servers okay for? Well, there are things that servers are okay for, but not for doing your own computing. When the job to be done is communication with somebody else, doing that through per web server is the sensible way to do it. So if you want to buy something from a store, say, so you have your computer, which is operating on your behalf, and the store has its computer, which is operating on the store's behalf, and the two discuss the transaction, and maybe eventually you say, yes, they agree, and together they do the transaction. Now, this is done in a way that respects the users on both sides, because each user's computer is working for that user. The store's computer is representing the store, and your computer is representing you. And if the job is divided up between the two sides, that's fair, and it's honest, and it respects the freedom of both you and the store. But nowadays, things are often not divided up this way. Of course, servers are okay also for simply publishing things. And if you're working in a project together with other people, and that project has a server to use as a code repository, that's fair too, because what you all use it for is to work on the project. When you're doing that, it's proper that you do that work in the project's server. But not GitHub, I hope. GitHub does a number of nasty things. For instance, you can't even make an account except by running some non-free software. And you can't talk with the developer of the package without making an account. So you can't report a bug without non-free software. Because of this, GitHub is unacceptable. So, computers are now being made malicious. For instance, Intel processors, since around 2010, have something called the management engine, which is essentially another processor built into the same chips. And this other processor has the ultimate control. The processor that you use can be shut off by the management engine. Its programs can be modified by the management engine. So it's a fully capable malicious backdoor. Well, you can turn it off, but those processors, since 2010 or so, they won't boot properly if the management engine is shut off. A timer somehow causes the machine to crash after a certain amount of time. Nobody has figured out how to prevent that. So, sad thing is that AMD processors have something similar. I'm not sure about ARM processors. We're getting into a situation where technology is so malicious that you can't completely get rid of the non-free software that makes your system insecure. Another nasty thing that is a tendency today is to make all users identify themselves. Sometimes this is called age verification. It just happens. Now, age verification might not seem inherently bad. Maybe it isn't inherently bad. If you could find a way of doing it that didn't identify each user, because identifying people is very dangerous. It collects data that is Orwellian. It is the basis for repression, for punishing people for their opinions, for their political activities, for whatever. If you identify people and everything they do, then you can tell everything a person does. And then you can decide whether to punish that person based on any criterion. This is what the saboteur-in-chief of the United States is doing. And then in Europe, there's a plan to ban, well, in the European Union, I should say, it probably wouldn't affect Switzerland, which is called chat control, and it would prohibit end-to-end encryption. Now, whether they could, they could prohibit certainly the apps that are distributed to the general public, but they're non-free. If you're wise, you won't use those anyway. But what about if you try to do end-to-end encryption by installing the GNU Privacy Guard, encrypting your message and sending it, and the person on the other side runs the GNU Privacy Guard to decrypt it? Will they go so far as to make using the GNU Privacy Guard a crime? Who knows? Once legislators are considering banning end-to-end encryption, which basically says you've got to be vulnerable to snooping by anybody, then how can you be sure what they wouldn't do? So that is called chat control. And we find that universities often require students to run non-free software. Many universities require students to run Zoom or maybe Google Meet or Microsoft Teams. They're all equally unjust. They're non-free software. You can't trust them. Zoom, I know, permits the company to censor conversations. If the company decides it doesn't want a certain group of people to have a conversation, it could just turn that one off and it would stop. I found this out when I read an article about how Zoom objected to a particular academic panel. I believe it was at San Jose State University in California. Anyway, the university maintained that it was lawful. Zoom didn't agree and just pulled the plug on the discussion. Well, obviously, a university that believes in academic freedom should never be a client of Zoom. But whether it's any different for Google or Microsoft, I don't know. And if they don't do the same thing now, they might start tomorrow. So universities should never ask students to run a non-free program. And that includes the programs that they use for academic work and also administrative programs. Everything can be done with free software. But it's the habit to impose non-free software on people, and I think we need to start organizing to reject it. They need to see that a group of students are saying this software is unjust and we won't run it. We'll give you the information you're asking for. I'll write mine on paper. I just won't run that program. If it's something that is part of the school's business to ask. The point is they shouldn't make you run a non-free program to hand it in. Governments are also victims of non-free software. Governments in Europe are being increasingly concerned with digital sovereignty, which basically means, does the state control its own computing? Or is that computing controlled by Microsoft, Apple, or Google, or whoever? Well, if they're running non-free software, they don't control their computing. And states, just as people, have the right to control their own computing, which means they need to insist on free software. That's the only way you can get that control. So I urge you to help us in the free software movement. And there are many kinds of help we could use. For instance, there are many free programs that could use more developers. If there's a program you like, take a look at its developer's platform, assuming it's not in GitHub, and see if they would like some help. See, maybe you know how. There's also administrative help. The GNU project has to keep track of how things are going and occasionally try to straighten out confusions, like looking for replacements for a developer who is gone. So we need people to do those kinds of things. And so if you're interested, take a look at gnu.org/help, either way. If you're good at writing text to explain how to use things, you could work on good user manuals. We need that. In addition, you can support us by joining the Free Software Foundation as a member and paying dues regularly. We need money to keep operating. I don't get paid. I'm a full-time volunteer. I've always been a volunteer. When I started the Free Software Foundation, I decided, since I'm asking other people to volunteer, I must also be a volunteer. I have to lead people where I hope they will go. And when I ask people to donate money, I don't want that to be donating to me. You can give me money if you like, and you'll know you're giving it to me because it'll be your decision. But if you donate to the FSF, that doesn't go to me. Not 1 cent. And you can join the FSF at fsf.org. And one nice thing about it is that website lets you make a payment without sending you any non-free software to run. We have to make sure of that because we have to practice what we preach. And we are very stubborn about practicing fully what we preach. We have to set a good example, an example of resisting all the bad solutions that are so accepted among others who don't think about this question. So now it's time for the auction, and which won't take more than a few minutes, and then it'll be time for questions. Have people handed out the pieces of paper for questions? Basically, they're going to hand out slips of paper. You can write your question in English or French if you like, but not German. I don't read German. and then they're going to be collected and given to me, and I'm going to read them. I'm going to read the question, say my answer, read the next question, say the answer. This goes much faster than other ways of handling questions in a talk.
So there are some pieces of paper there and there should be. There's some as well.
The thing to do is walk down the aisles and hand out pieces of paper to the audience members, and then you could pass it down the row, and that way everybody who wants I suggest handing a few to the first person, and they'll pass them along and redistribute them. It's easy, it's efficient that way. Are there enough pieces of paper?
Yes.
I'm starting to feel that they're not enough, that it would be good if there were several times as many. The point is, you make a few hundred pieces of paper, and you go to each row and you give them 10.
Yeah. No, we have paper. So, sure.
Anyway, while that's going on, I will do the auction. This is an adorable GNU that needs a home. So I'm going to auction it for the benefit of the Free Software Foundation. If you wish to bid, wave your arm and shout the amount you're bidding, because you want me to know. I've got some hearing problems. Make sure you get through to me. What use is it to bid if the auctioneer doesn't know that you bid? It doesn't do any good. So, if you like, I will try to sign the card, this strip of cloth that's on this one, and I'm going to start with 70 francs. Do I get any bids? How much?
70, you said.
Okay. When you bid, just shout the amount. Don't wait for me to look at you, but wave your arm. Don't just raise it. Wave it, because that way I'll see you. I'll notice. Okay, I've got 70. Do I get 80? Do I get 80 francs for this adorable canoe? How much? You say?
80.
I've got 80. Because you can always bid more, you see. I don't know how much. I can always say what the minimum is. But you've got to say how much you're actually bidding. I've got 80 francs for this adorable canoe. Do I get 90 or more? Do I get 90 francs or more for this adorable? How much? What?
100.
I've got 100. Do I get 110? 110 francs for this adorable canoe that needs a home. 110 or more to the Free Software Foundation.
120.
I've got 120. Do I get 130 or more? 130 or more for this adorable GNU? Last, 130. Do I get 140 or more? 140 or more for this adorable GNU?
150.
I've got 150. Do I get 160 or more? 160 or more for this adorable GNU? That's so easy to cuddle. 160 or more? Last chance to bid 160 or more for this adorable GNU. Last chance, going, gone for 150. Please come up and pay.
Cash?
Yeah, well, you could go to an ATM and come back and,
Yeah, I'll do that.
okay. Yeah, I'll be around. So now it's time to auction this book. This is an adorable book that needs a home. So I'm going to auction it for the benefit of the Free Software Foundation. And if you're the winning bidder and you wish me to sign it, I'll sign it for you. And I'm going to start with 60 francs.
Which book is it?
This is my book of essays, Free Software, Free Society. I should have said that. I'm a little sleepy today. Sorry, but I couldn't help it. I woke up too soon. Anyway, so this is the third edition of Free Software, Free Society. And I'm starting the bidding at 60 francs. Do I get 60 francs for this adorable? How much? I've got 60. Do I get 70 for this adorable book? I've got 100. Do I get 110? 110? Do I get 110 francs for this? I've got 110. Do I get 120? 120 francs for this adorable book, which also can be used to cool yourself off. It doesn't work so well through a mask. Do I get 120 for this adorable book? Last chance to bid 120 or more. Last chance. Going. Okay, I've got 120. Do I get 130? 130 or more for this adorable book? I've got 130. Do I get 140? 140 for this adorable book about the ideas of free software. 140 or more for this adorable book. Last chance to bid 140 or more. Last chance. Gone for 130. Please come up and pay. Well, I can wait if you need to go get some. Yeah. You can. I can watch you do it. And everybody, please remember that there is a. Oh, is she still there? Oh, there. Okay, she's right near the table. If you want to buy any of the less expensive merchandise, you can go there on your way out and support us.
Can I bring you the remaining 10 after the talk?
Yes.
That's around 20.
Okay.
The book can wait.
Okay. Yeah. So,
Which currency will we bidding?
francs. Swiss francs. There aren't any French francs anymore. So I'll have to watch you do it so that I know it happened. But we can do it at the end so that I don't make everyone wait now. So are there any questions collected?
Yeah, could I ask people to just pass their questions in front?
Go walk around.
Yeah.
Don't make them come to you. Make it easy for them.
Well, okay, there are many of them.
Okay. No, don't. I can do that. I am capable of turning a piece of paper to be right side up. In fact, I do that without even really noticing, but I can't reach over there. It's too far away. This is good. What do you recommend to use instead of GitHub? Well, Codeberg is fairly good. It doesn't get a grade of A on our scale, but it passes. It's not a failing grade like GitHub. And there are others, you can look at our posted repo criteria and judge other sites. Where to start as someone with little to no programming experience? Start reading source code and understanding what the programs do, and then writing enhancements or changes that you would like. That's assuming you want to do programming. Not everybody wants to do programming. Not everybody has the skill, the kind of mind that does good programming. If programming isn't for you, it turns out, do something else. But if you have a fascination for programming, start studying programs, start improving them, start showing your changes to other hackers to get their criticism, and that way you'll get to be good at it. There is no current computer that I know of that is morally acceptable. But if you're willing to tolerate that, at least you can avoid lots of other nastiness by installing a free system on top of one of those laptops. What do you think about systemd? Well, I haven't thought a lot about the issue of systemd. It is free software after all. It's not malicious as far as I know. And if someone found anything malicious or even just a bad bug, people could fix it because it's free software. Oh, what do I think about Cyber Resiliency Act? It doesn't seem to be horrible. They seem to be seriously trying to make it possible for the free software community to keep on developing useful software. Things could go wrong, and I'm not an expert on it. And as the other one, RED, I don't know that one. What is it? What?
Radio Equipment Directive.
Well, what? I couldn't hear you.
Radio Equipment Directive.
I don't know about it. Does anyone here know of something dangerous in it? I mean, where is the FSF now? I don't understand that question. We no longer have an office where most of the staff work. They work from wherever they are. There is a micro office where there's one person working on ordinary working days, usually. What is left to do? Oh, so much. If you know of a program that seems to do an interesting thing, and there isn't free software to do it, if people are using that proprietary program, so obviously it's a thing people want to do, and we don't have a free program to do it with, that's work that needs to be done. What do you think the next generation should do better? Well, ideally, learn to demand freedom and reject so-called solutions where you have to pay with your freedom. And part of that is a matter of rejecting the convenience-oriented open source philosophy. Every time people talk about open source, they're helping to market the open source philosophy and its values of convenience, as opposed to freedom, control of your own computing, and freedom to cooperate in society. And if people learn to value superficial things and forget about the important things, well, a fool and his freedom are soon parted. Well, something's asking what I think about, this person used the term AI, which I read, but that's probably a misunderstanding. The things I'm guessing you're talking about large language models, and I do not consider them to be intelligence. And the reason is I define intelligence as the ability to know and understand within some domain. And it's clear that large language models don't actually understand the text they input or the text they output. They try to fake it, and sometimes it looks like they may have understood, but other times you see that they're grossly short of really understanding. I don't trust them. Aside from that, I'm not willing to let my computing be done on someone else's server because that's not trustworthy. And that's the way they work. All the main and highly publicized large language models are running on somebody's server, and all you can do is get an account where you can pay to send a query and get back the result. That's not having control of your computing. Okay. How can free software survive with CRA requirement of secure booting and encrypting all firmware? I don't know about this. But, I mean, what I've heard about doesn't include this, which doesn't prove it isn't there. It just means I don't know enough. And I'm going to save this and bring it up with someone. What alternatives to Discord do you see? Well, Discord is a service that requires you to run non-free software, and I don't use it at all. So obviously, I have alternatives to it. I don't understand, but you know about them. Like, you probably heard of email. And so if you don't see an alternative, that means we're sort of miscommunicating. I don't know why you think it's hard to find an alternative to that. I think there's a page, stallman.org/discord.html, which explains why I think you shouldn't use it. Is there a way of earning a living with free software? Oh, there are many, and there are many people who practice them. A large fraction of all paid programming work is for writing the specific software some person or organization wants to run. This is software being made to order. And that business works fine if you simply give the client your work as free software, which the client ought to insist on if the client is not a fool. But the client will still agree to pay you to write this, because nobody's going to write that kind of software as a volunteer. So the clients will realize we can't get away without paying just by asking it for it to be free software. We'll be able to demand that it be free software if we pay. So they'll continue paying for the same reason they pay for it now. But their freedom will be respected this way. Do I think, again, he calls these things AI. I reject that term. There are some systems I think qualify as artificial intelligence, but they don't do things like writing code. They don't operate on text. There is a program that can figure out most of the time how an amino acid sequence would fold up as a protein. This is an extremely hard problem, and that program does it better than humans can do it. So I think we have to admit that that's intelligence within a specific, important domain. But LLMs are not artificial intelligence, so I don't think they provide a net benefit to anyone. The way they appear to provide a benefit, well, they provide a benefit to companies that need to provide customer service. And if they can fire all the humans who are doing it and hook up a large language model chatbot that gives lousy or very limited customer support, but the customers don't have much choice, then those companies might profit by adopting this lousy stuff. And I have been compelled, are there any usable GPL search engines? Well, that's not really a meaningful question because a search engine is not a program. A search engine is a service, meaning you don't run it on your own machine. That would be absurd. There may be a search engine program that is available, but whether it's free or not, it wouldn't make sense for you or me to run it. I don't want to have my computer trying to spider the web. It's an enormous task. It makes sense for that to be done by a service. But the thing is, a service is not a program. You can't release a service for people to copy. It can't be copied. Programs can be copied. It's a fixed set of text. Any given version is a fixed set of text, and people can copy it and they can install it and run it. You can't copy a service at all. Even if you have all the software, you still can't copy the service. You could install the same software on your own machine, but that's not a copy of the service which that software came from. So there can't be a search engine covered by any particular license like the GNU GPL. So this question is not even well posed. Curious about your choice of mobile devices. What mobile phone do you use? None. Never. It's an Orwellian device that tracks the person everywhere and can be listening all the time. I will not submit to that. And what apps, if any? The apps are non-free. Now, okay, for Android, there are some free apps, but they're not in the Google Play Store. They're in F-Droid. Okay, so those apps are free software. I don't have criticism of them. And there are, well, people make mostly free versions of Android. But they're still Orwellian. Their movements are tracked by the phone network, which means that whatever your software does, you can't prevent the phone from being tracked. This is preparation for persecution. And we are seeing around the world that more and more governments are respecting human rights less and less. Do you think there is any good use of bullshit generators? That's one of my terms for large language models, because they don't know they're generating bullshit. They don't understand. I don't see much good use for them. In any case, well, if we had one, suppose we had one that you could run on, was free software and you could run on your own computer, well, I don't know. People might find some good use for it. And if it turned out to be convenient and reliable, I wouldn't complain, not if it's freedom respecting. And you mentioned that Libre is not the same as gratis. In an ideal non-free software free world, I'm afraid I don't understand that. What's the right business model for companies to make a living from software development, and especially from individual programmers' point of view? I think I sort of answered that. But I presented one model that could be very broadly used. But there are other people being paid to develop free software. There are people who are being paid by big companies to develop free software. Governments need a lot of software, and for the sake of their sovereignty, it needs to be free software, so they better appropriate the money to pay for it to be developed. And if they understand the consequences of digital sovereignty, they will start doing that because they know they need to. Vous aviez mentionné que les restrictions sur les tracteurs étaient potentiellement légitimes, mais que le mal était dans les restrictions illégitimes. Les licences First Do No Harm permettent d'appliquer les restrictions, par exemple, seulement dans ces situations de guerre. He's talking about licenses which try to restrict what you can use the program for. I am against those, because the program's developer should not have that kind of arbitrary power. Now, this is not the same question as the question of whether a tractor should have a remote shut-off mal feature, because that remote shut-off mal feature is power in the hands of the manufacturer over each user. And that power is extremely harmful and extremely unjust. But these licenses that this question is talking about say, they list things you're not allowed to use it for. And the manufacturer, the developer of a program should not have the power to decide what uses are legitimate. That should be decided by governments democratically. And there are things which are illegal to do with a program. But that's not specifically about one program. For instance, fraud is a crime. You can use a program to commit fraud, but if you do, it's a crime. I think that law is proper. It should be a crime to commit fraud. But the developer of a program shouldn't have any decision about that. Fraud should be a crime even if you use pencil and paper. And the fact that it's a crime is a decision that should be made democratically by society, not by the developer of a pencil or a program or any other piece of equipment that happens to be usable for fraud. We cannot allow the developers of software to make decisions about how we are allowed to use them. That's a power that no private individual should have, or private company, or even other organization. The decision on a criminal law has to be done in a way that respects basic human rights. What are your thoughts on Louis Rossmann from the Right to Repair? Is he the guy who is promoting some non-free licenses? I think it is. I don't remember its name. I think I recall he was a supporter of Right to Repair, and maybe he still is, but he's certainly not a supporter of free software now. Is there a reason to have systems like e-banking, which are secure by keeping their code hidden? That's a joke. Be free? Well, that is called security through obscurity. The right way to make such communication secure is by using encryption in a way that can't fail to be secure. And we already have things like that. But banks don't use them. But we hope that they will start. There's a free system for essentially digital cash payments. It's called GNU+. It's not a cryptocurrency. It's a payment system. The payments will typically be denominated in some country's currency, typically the country in which you're making the payment. And there's generally some amount of Thaler tokens you're allowed to get per month. And then you can use them to pay for whatever. And it's equivalent to paying in physical cash. There's no way for the payee to find out who paid. Making the payment is anonymous, but the payee is required to identify herself. So you have to show state-approved organizations how much money you're bringing in through Thaler payments. Therefore, these cannot be used to hide income from taxation, which is a very important thing. Of course, it's ironic to be talking about this in Switzerland. Well, of course, Switzerland has also changed its policies about this substantially in the past couple of decades. The point is that Thaler is designed to be convenient to have millions of people buying things with Thaler tokens all the time. And it's actually functioning now in Switzerland. There's a restaurant in Biel which accepts Thaler payments. And they're trying to convince some more to start doing so. If you reside in Switzerland and you have a bank account, I believe you could now get Thaler tokens. Should people study computer? This is not an age of AI. It's not even intelligence at all. That's just bullshit. Are large language models software as well? Well, a large language model consists of some software and some data, which is a trained network. It might be a neural net, it might be another kind of net, but one way or another, software trains it, and then software runs it to make decisions or reach conclusions. And yeah, but that part is software, but the trained network is not software, it's data. And we are currently working on finalizing a criterion for what it takes for machine learning conjunction to be free. And I hope we will have that finished in not too long. Is there a more effective way to check if a computer system is running non-free software other than checking the licenses of all installed binaries manually? I don't know of one. Now, someone suggested a known blacklist / whitelist. Well, that might be possible. But the point is, each distro effectively has one. You've got a distro with binaries. If you make a checksum of each of the binary each binary that's in a package of the distro, you could very quickly checksum all the binaries on your system and find out which binaries are not from that distro. But I don't know that anybody is trying to do this. And usually you installed it, and you know what you installed it from. But if there's actually a need for something like this, you might want to start to work on it. If you come across an actual use for this, then you could tell whether the thing you're working on would be useful in that situation. In 2026, there is hardly any device or either a phone or a PC that will not require proprietary drivers. Well, we need people to do reverse engineering to develop free replacement drivers. And we need to have a big enough movement that we could pressure the companies that foist unjust computers on us and make them stop. It's not easy. Is there any way that LLMs can be compatible with free software? Well, I'm not sure what compatible means in this context, but as I said, we're working on a criterion for whether a given machine learning system qualifies as free. Because there are lots of kinds of machine learning systems other than LLMs. There are some that I think even qualify as intelligence. But that's actually orthogonal to the question of whether it's free. So we're working on the criterion for whether it's free. How should developers of free as in freedom software react to stupid laws like the OS level age verification? I don't know yet. I think we'll have to talk with lawyers to find out whether we can get away with trivially ignoring them or patching around them, or whether it's a disaster or what. What distro do you use on your devices? Well, I have two computers and they both have Treescale installed. Treescale is one of the gnu+linux distros that is entirely free software. What do you recommend to people who work in the creative industry where everyone uses the Adobe suite or other non-free software? How can one change that? I don't know. I mean, this kind of thing where you take something that very user subjugating and you make it effectively a standard, so a de facto standard But so many people have fallen into the trap that they're trying to pull everybody else into the trap with them. It's a hard problem, and I don't know an answer for it. But reverse engineering may be helpful. There may be some aspect of those malicious programs, the reverse engineering of which would enable people who are caught to try to stick one hand outside. About copyleft licenses. Aren't we relying on the legal system to protect our freedom? Yeah, that's the thing that protects freedom in most ways that it is protected. Aren't we relying on the very system that forces backdoors and surveillance on us? Well, not directly. There's nothing in U.S. law currently that says systems must be proprietary. But the actions of certain companies have resulted in a situation where most systems are at least partly proprietary. In fact, most systems installed are, in fact, proprietary. They're vicious. But there's no law saying it has to be that way. I wouldn't say that the legal system, at least in the U.S., forces proprietary software on us. Companies are making use of it and operating under it, and they find ways of forcing proprietary software on us. Can you pay the FSF with GNU+? No, and the reason is it's only functioning in Switzerland, and the FSF doesn't operate in Switzerland. Can't, and there are reasons why it can't start to do so. Like, we don't want to have to pay taxes to Switzerland. In the U.S., the FSF doesn't have to pay taxes. It's a tax-exempt charity. But Swiss laws about charities are different. There's no reason to suppose that the FSF could become a charity in Switzerland. What's your opinion on something like video games that are more artistic in nature, unlikely to be changed, often independent of internet connection? Oh, well, who says? First of all, there is nothing less essential than a video game. So, if I had time to play a video game, I would play a free one. And they exist. But, there's this idea people have, what they want is the most attractive one, in some sense. But that's silly. There's no need to have that kind of preference. If you care enough about freedom, you'll say, let's play this free game. And then you might, if the game doesn't seem to be sufficiently exciting, maybe you can try modifications to it so that it will be more satisfying to play. So really, it's a matter of what your assumptions are. As I recall, Nix contains some non-free software. So I would say no, I couldn't recommend that you install it. We won't recommend the thing if it includes components that we consider unjust. We have free software. Can there be free hardware? That's actually not a coherent concept. I thought about this for a couple of years and wrote an article about it. it's not meaningful to ask whether a piece of hardware or its design, to ask whether a piece of hardware is free is not coherent, because a usable piece of hardware generally has different levels of design that coexist in it. And it normally can't be copied, not easily. I mean, you could build more, but you can't do that by running a copier. You have to build the parts and put them together and build higher level assemblies, and eventually you've built another product. So this is very different from software. You can't apply the same answer to a question that is fundamentally different. But it does make sense, if you're looking at a hardware design, to ask whether that design is free. And so that's the meaningful way to extend the idea of free software to hardware. Namely, it's the hardware designs that are free or not. But until we can make our own chips, we don't really need free chip designs. We're stuck using whatever chips are mass produced, and we can't modify the designs they're made from. In theory, maybe you could, but we couldn't mass produce the modified design, so it wouldn't do us any good. This might change someday. 50 years from now, if we have our own chip fabricators and they can fabricate whatever design we want, then we might have a great need for useful, free chip designs. And people would make them, because they would become useful in that context. So the two areas are only partly analogous. Take a look at the article gnu.org/philosophy/freehardwaredesigns.html. Which tips do you have for students wanting to make a change in the university's infrastructure, which is based on non-free software? You have to find ways to agitate, and you need to find opportunities to refuse, and you need to find workarounds. For video and audio communication, it turns out that there are ways to gateway one conferencing system to another by means of share screen. So if there's one person who is on a class Zoom discussion and is willing to start up a Galen conversation and gateway them to each other, then some of the students could get on the Galen communication, and they would get to see what the teacher is saying, and they would more or less get to be heard as well. They could participate, and they wouldn't be running the non-free software. And when some students start doing this and talking about this and saying, why are you making us run that nasty system when this one works just fine, and if there's anything missing in it, well, we could write it. You could have what you want. It might work. I'm not saying I've got a method that will work. Do you think we're in a better situation now compared with the 90s? Well, it's hard to say. Well, actually, yes. Back then, we lacked tremendously important things. And now, I think we could do without them, the things that we don't have. But clearly things are not perfect. We've heard about the Adobe non-free software that spies on every user. Why do big tech companies scale so well? I haven't the faintest idea. Who are they? What are the expansion plans? What is intentional bad? This is rather mysterious and cryptic. I don't know how to. And it says code is data, data is code. Well, they have a relationship to each other, indeed, but I think that's an oversimplification. How do free software developers make a living? The assumption in this question is that you're writing a program and then you're going to try to make each user pay. But that's not the only way to raise funds to develop software and pay for the development. Another method is by asking people to donate. You want a free program to do this? Want this particular free program to have this feature? Donate. Now, it's a sad thing that GoFundMe requires non-free software both for the donor and for the one who's raising the funds. I would never have anything to do with GoFundMe. I can't promote a GoFundMe campaign. But that's raising funds in that way is a method of hiring a programmer to write something. How can I value, reimburse a contribution to free software as a user? I don't understand this use of the word value. To me, to value something means to appreciate. It means to have a feeling of appreciation. This is good. This is useful. It's not an action. So I have a feeling that this word is being used in a strange way here. I think there's a difference between valuing something and sending money to someone. Valuing something is a mental attitude. But if the question really is, how can I send money to a developer? Well, often you can ask that person, how can I send you some money? And one way is mail per a check. That's how you could do it with me. What is the difference between GPL 1, 2, and 3? This is described in gnu.org/licenses. There are various pages about questions like this. And then, will there be a GPL 4? As of now, I don't know of any reason that we need to make a GPL 4. And it would be a big job, so I hope we never need to do it. Some tools from core utils get rewritten in Rust. Do you think this will be a problem? Well, yes and no. In general, writing a replacement for a GPL cover program with a non-copyleft license is foolishly weakening our community. It is undermining our community's defenses for our freedom. And thus it is a stupid or harmful thing to do. And this is a consequence of the almost 30 years of propaganda for open source, which avoids talking about freedom ever. They basically deny the existence of the issue about freedom versus injustice and hope that people won't even think about it. And sometimes that's effective, and it's our loss when they do. What can I say? Proprietary software is often forced onto users by deals with hardware manufacturers, e.g. Windows. Free software often lacks capital. How do you think we can make free software the default for the non-technical user? These questions are not really related very much. We don't need free software to be the default for the non-technical user. Part of it is we'd have to do a better job at designing software that is natural for non-technical users to use. There are many problems here, and if we can imagine solving them, it would be different. Some of it, though, you could work on by working on interface development. These things have to be done, in our community, they have to be done step by step. Is digital sovereignty a strict subset of free software? I don't know what that means. Digital sovereignty is an abstract concept, and free software is a category of programs. So one's not a part of the other. I think that this may just be expressed in an inarticulate way. But I don't know what it means. A strict subset, I don't understand. Do you mean, does any non-free program does the use of any non-free program by the state trample the state's digital sovereignty? I think so, because if it's not free software for the state, that means it's controlled by some other entity. And the use of that program by the state means that that entity has power over the state, and that is loss of sovereignty. How can freedom as an incentive compete with convenience and greed? Well, sometimes it does. You shouldn't assume that that greed wins 100%. It wins sometimes. It's partly a matter of what shapes people's attitudes in society. Now, businesses with a lot of money have learned to very effectively manipulate people's values. And that is a big problem. I'm not an expert on that. I don't know how to do that kind of publicity. How important is bootstrapability for freedom? I'm not completely sure what bootstrapability means concretely. I can imagine multiple meanings. Do you want to tell me what you meant by this? Could you speak louder, please? I can't hear you at all. Okay.
By bootstrapability, I mean...
I can't hear you. I can't hear the sounds. I have hearing problems. And my problem is in identifying the speech sounds. If you pronounce each word clearly, like this, then I can recognize the words you say.
By bootstrapability, I mean the possibility to compile it directly or indirectly from minimal and kind of understandable.
Compile from what?
From minimal binary seeds. Because at some point...
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear those last words. From something, library, something.
No, not library.
What?
Minimal binary seeds.
Binary thief?
Seeds.
I'm sorry, I don't understand concretely what the question is.
So what Raphael is trying to say is by...
Louder, please, louder.
Me do without the...
No, with the microphone, but louder.
Okay. What Raphael is trying to say is that bootstrapability is... Tell me?
Compiling from minimal binary seeds.
Compiling from minimal binary seeds. Seeds.
I'm not sure what a seed is in this context.
When you bootstrap a compiler, then you need to have some binary that you handwrite, don't you?
I guess you need to have a compiler binary to compile the compiler.
Yes. And if you start out with a compiler that you just get, it is in a way non-free because you don't know where it came from. So you want...
Well, I'm afraid I have no solution to that.
I see. Thank you.
To me, that's an abstract kind of problem, demanding a kind of perfection, a mathematical sort of perfection, which I don't think we need. What is your favorite cake? I'm not sure I have one. I like various kinds of cakes. There is a kind of cake I used to be able to get at any time, which is called a chocolate chip crumb loaf, which you can hardly find anymore. It's made by a particular company in the US, but they only rarely seem to deliver any to the stores, and it's a shame because it's delicious. But there are other kinds of cakes I like. I don't know if they have particular kinds of names. That has a specific name because it's a commercial product and there's a name on the package.
Was that your last question, Richard?
That's the last one.
Hey, that's a nice place to end. Thank you very much.
So I'm waiting for 10 francs. I'm waiting for 10 francs for the book. And we've got to deal with the payment for the GNU.
Good. From my
And
point...
don't forget to buy FSF merch down there.
So it was great to see all of you here. Have a nice evening and hopefully see you again. Hopefully you'll come again and give us another talk. Thank you very much again.
Well, this took a lot longer than I expected.
Yeah.
Took 2.5 hours.
That is true. Yeah.